What if I told you that Ferrari secretly installed a component in the Lewis Hamilton car without warning him? And that this technical detail could have completely sabotaged its performance in the Belgian GP? Stay, because this is not a theory. It is a story of technical failures, hidden decisions, and a furious reaction from Frédéric Vasseur. The catastrophe was created since Friday. During the sprint classification, on a partially dry but extremely technical track, Hamilton lost control of his car in the last curve of the layout, the iconic chicane of the stop bus. The image was disconcerting. Without warning, the rear axle of the SF25 was blocked violently, sending the car out of the track. There were no previous warnings, there was no visible degradation of tires, there was no apparent piloting error. Only a mechanical disconnection that seemed to arise from nothing. Throughout the afternoon, the team reviewed telemetries in search of answers. What they found did not reassure anyone. The data showed an inconsistent signal in the braking pressure of the rear axle just before the incident, something that indicated an anomalous response of the brake-by-wire system. Hamilton, visibly frustrated, declared before the press that the car felt unpredictable, as if he didn't know what he was going to do in the next curve. And that, coming from a 7-time world champion, was not a minor complaint. On Saturday, the situation reached a new level of bewilderment. In the official classification, Hamilton was eliminated in Q1. This time, it was not due to lack of pure speed, but for an error of track limits in Rydillen, one of the most dangerous curves of the calendar. But even that error was not isolated. Onboard cameras showed a nervous, unstable car when entering the compression of Eau Rouge without sufficient rear load to maintain balance. Hamilton tried to force a clean turn, but the car did not cooperate. It ended 16th out of battle and with a sepulchral silence. This was a devastating blow for a team that had put huge expectations in its new star signing. In all his career, Hamilton had never been eliminated twice in consecutive in Q1, much less in a circuit where he has historically shown. For fans, it was a shock. For Ferrari, it was a red alert. Because it was no longer only performance. Something deeper and problematic was happening in the heart of SF25. The combination of technical failures, disconnected tactical decisions, and the disconnection between car and pilot generated a tense atmosphere inside the paddock. While the rivals took advantage of the changing conditions to try new configurations, Ferrari seemed to take steps back. He walked to a crest, avoided long interviews, and spent more time than usual locked in his motorhome. And in the meantime, in the Ferrari engineers, signs of an awkward truth began to appear. What they had installed in Hamilton's SF25 was not identical to that of Leclerc. And that difference could explain the chaos that was lived in Spa. During the Montreal GP, months before, Ferrari had begun to silently try a new rear brake module in the Leclerc car. This component, a second-generation BBB wind-wire hybrid set, was designed to offer greater consistency in hydraulic pressure in long brakes and a more harmonious integration with the ERS system. The objective was clear: maximize energy efficiency without compromising mechanical control. But the project was far from being finished, and they all knew that within the R&D department. And yet someone in Ferrari decided to install this experimental module in Hamilton's car during the Belgian GP, without the due final validation protocol, and the most serious, without openly informing the pilot or his career engineer. The result was an undercover technical disaster. The brake-by-wire system that controlled the rear axle presented a random delay between the pilot's order and the real execution of the braking. Under conditions of maximum demand, such as Eau Rouge or the braking towards them combs, this translated into sudden blockages and total tensile loss. In a car like the SF25, where the rear balance is key to its performance, this was practically unacceptable. But the problem did not end there. Integration with the ERS was unconfined. The energy recovery system, which must work in tune with braking to recharge batteries without affecting stability, showed significant delays. Sometimes, the electric motor delivered residual torque just when Hamilton had already begun mechanical braking. This generated microampuges on the rear axle that made the car push itself in the most compromised curves. And if that were not enough, the descending changes of march were generating vibrations that had not been seen before in the SF25. These vibrations, caused by a poorly calibrated interaction between the new brake unit and the gearbox, destabilized the car just when Hamilton needed more load to maneuver. Each lap became a survival exercise rather than a classification or career session. For Lewis, the sensation from the cockpit was of total distrust. I couldn't anticipate what the car would do in the next curve. He accelerated with uncertainty. I stopped with fear. And in a sport where margins are millimeter, that disconnection with the car is lethal. The loss of trust is the principle of collapse for any pilot, even for one with 7 world titles. These types of decisions install a critical component without direct approval not only compromise performance, they break the bond of trust between pilot and team. And that bond, in squires like Ferrari, has been historically fragile. When the pilot feels that he is not receiving the same technical treatment as his partner, an alarm is difficult to silence. Was it a poorly communicated decision or a deliberate act to accelerate the development of the piece without putting Leclerc at risk? Why was Hamilton the unexpected test bench in a high-risk circuit as a Spa? These questions began to circulate between Maranello's halls with more and more intensity. And the worst was yet to come, when Vasseur would take full knowledge of the case. When Fred Vasseur was officially informed of the unauthorized installation of the new brake-by-wire module in Lewis Hamilton's car, his reaction was immediate and explosive. Vasseur immediately convened an extraordinary meeting at the headquarters of the technical team, a private session that, according to internal reports, lasted more than 3 hours and in which the cross-reproaches did not miss. Nearby sources say that phrases such as, "Who authorized this modification?" The pressure, already high due to the low performance of the car in the first races, shot at unbearable levels. Since his arrival, Vasseur had promised technical discipline, clear communication, and an ordered operational hierarchy. What he found in Spa was the opposite, a decision taken behind the pilot and sports leadership, executed by an autonomous technical subgroup, without consulting the director of engineering or Hamilton's own career engineer. This operational fragmentation that Ferrari had suffered during his darkest years of the past decade seemed to resurface at the worst moment. Internally, there was talk of a loss of control about the development of the car. Because if a piece as critical as the brake system can be installed without the approval of the performance department, then what other areas are acting outside the central control? What implications would this have in other decisions of configuration, strategy, or aerodynamic development? Before the media, his body language was revealing. He avoided the forced smiles, his tone was more severe than usual, and although he did not point with names, he made his position clear. In an interview after the GP, he said, "When you have a pilot like Lewis in your team, you cannot afford improvisations. He needs confidence, and trust is built with technical coherence. This was not a good week for us." Bated doors, Vasseur ordered an internal audit of the technical validation processes. He demanded new protocols to ensure that any experimental component passes through more rigorous filters, and that no high-risk modification is implemented without explicit authorization from the management. A roles review was also raised according to Fuentes within the area of electronic integration and braking dynamics, which could lead to structural changes before the Hungary GP. But beyond the operational decisions, what Vasseur tried to control was something even more intangible and fragile: the morale of the team. Because an error like this not only destroys races, but internally fragments the culture of equipment. Hamilton had arrived in Ferrari not only as a pilot, but as a symbol of a new era. And if that era began with involuntary technical sabotages, the confidence that cost years to recover after the Binotto era was in serious danger of breaking. And while the cameras moved away from the red boxes, a question remained in the air. Can Vasseur stay together with Ferrari under pressure, or the system will fracture before Hamilton has the opportunity to fight for a new title? The unauthorized installation of the experimental brake module left Hamilton at the mercy of an unpredictable car. What should have been a phase of progressive adaptation to SF25 became an experience of accumulated frustration, technical suspicion, and emotional isolation. In an environment like Ferrari, where media and political expectations have always been excessive, any sign of dissonance is magnified. Is Leclerc receiving preferential treatment? Is Hamilton simply a public relations experiment instead of a centerpiece of the sports project? These questions are not just rhetorical. They are the same that feed narratives in the media and that erode the technical authority if they are not immediately addressed. And this places Fred Vasseur in an extremely delicate position, because now not only has to correct the technical error and reorganize the internal decisions chain, you have to convince Hamilton that she can still trust the project. And even more difficult, he has to convince the world that Ferrari remains a first-level team, capable of competing from U to U with McLaren and Red Bull in the remainder of the season. Spa-Francorchamps left many lessons. But perhaps the most important is this: in Formula One modern, it is not enough to have the car faster. You have to have the most solid team. And today, Ferrari has to decide what kind of team wants to be in this era of implacable challenges. I invite you to leave your opinion in the comments. Are we facing a simple logistic and technical error, or is this the evidence of a structural fracture that Ferrari does not want to admit? Can Hamilton overcome this distrust and align with the team in your fight to stay strong? And what will Fred Vasseur do, whose leadership is now under scrutiny more than ever?